Sonic, the heart of your system.
I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru. Today is the first day of Computex and we're starting off seeing Gigabyte, hence the Aorus branding. Now I had a plan, it was a good plan. The plan was to look at motherboards over there and laptops over there. However, all the laptops over there have been taken to a room over there for a presentation that's currently going on. So all the laptops have been taken away and put in that room. In addition, we've also got the Aero 15 OLED, which obviously has an OLED panel. Can't wait to see that in action, but it also has a new chassis. So the brand new Aero 15 is called OLED, and the revised Aero 15 with the new processors is called Classic. Figure that one out. Over here we've got a load of motherboards. We've got Z390 refresh, we've got X299 refresh, but what we've really got, X570 from AMD. We were at Gigabyte's HQ yesterday, I'm losing track of the days already, and we saw a whole load of X570 products. We're just going to run down the line actually. I'm going to point to what appeals to me and catches my eye. So moving past the RTX 2080 Ti graphics card, which is of interest, but not actually of keen interest, because behind it we have an X570i Mini ITX Aorus Pro Wi-Fi motherboard. This is, by standards of Gigabyte, a radical and new motherboard. Mini ITX, it's an enthusiast platform. It's either cheap and cheerful or it's enthusiast. This is very much enthusiast. Under there, we've got two M.2 slots. This is an 8-layer PCB, enthusiast hardware throughout. Just for comparison, if we go up to this Z390 board, obviously a different platform, we can see just by eye, the hardware is nothing like, and if we drop back down to the X570, it is totally different. We do not have a price for the X570i. I'm mildly afraid about this because we've seen high-end enthusiast Mini ITX from the likes of ASRock very often, and it can get expensive. Nonetheless, liking the look of that. Over here, X570 Aorus Elite. This is, to my eyes, actually, a higher end without being ultra high end. So we've got good stuff. We've got the active cooler we're going to see a lot of on X570 chipsets. The word is the X570 chipset produces about 11 watts of heat. We think X470 was around about the 4 or 5 watts. So we're talking significantly more. There's an awful lot more data traffic going through. A load of PCI Express and obviously faster traffic as well. So we've got the active chipset, we've got M.2 with heatsink, and Gigabyte, we notice, is using the M.2s to carry the branding of the model code, which is actually quite useful for journalists. They're looking at the thing. And then if we go up to the VRMs, a load of power phases. Gigabyte has done some good work. We can see here 14 phases, not quite true in that it's 14 in total. That's actually 12 plus 2, 12 for the CPU, 2 for the chipset. Continuing across from the 570 Elite to the 570 Pro, we can see we've got 14 phases once more. We've now got dual M.2s. We've got active cooling. It's worth actually just taking a look at the two coolers. We can see that the Pro and the Elite use subtly different coolers. I must confess, this sort of thing that drives me slightly to distraction, because it's never clear how much of this is aesthetics and how much is down to mechanical design. It's a similar thing with the heat sinks over the VRMs. Again, the Pro and the Elite, which are so similar in many respects, and they've worked to make them slightly different. This heatsink here is quite clearly different to that heatsink here over here on the Elite. And yet, I would say thermally, they probably do a very similar job. So to my eyes, the styling people have been at it. We come across now to the X570 Aorus Ultra, an extensive cover over the VRM heatsinks. That is again 14 phases, so 12 plus 2. We've now got triple M.2. They're segmenting the thing like crazy. We keep coming across. Okay, now we're moving to the higher end. So we have the Master, which is 14 phases again, but now we're up to Infineon VRMs, triple M.2. It's basically got mostly everything you could possibly want an X570 board, including up here we have postcode, we have Your flick switches for control of the bias. I can't see from this distance, I'm going to guess that's flicking from bias 1 to bias 2. We've got multiple RGB connectors. The default, we are told, with Gigabyte for X570 is going to be an ARGB connector. If you have extra connectors, you'll also get legacy 12-volt RGB. ARGB is the new normal. And then we come to the master. Now this is going to be tethered, so I'm going to pick it up carefully. And if we go around to the edge there, all the connectors are down the edge. Now, I was asking about this yesterday when we were at their HQ, basically saying in a very rude manner, why didn't you do this before? It makes so much sense. We love this. Look at it. Look at the foot of the board. There's nothing there. Connecting all the case connections and such like, and hooking into the extra USB, easy peasy. The aesthetic is absolutely amazing. And the guy kind of rolled his eyes at me somewhat and said, yes, 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 but we've had to add layers to the PCB and we've had to separate the traces to make sure there's no signal degradation. We can only do this, he said, on the E80X because of the extra size of the form factor, and it costs extra money. I said, how much is this board? He said, we're not really sure. I've got the distinct impression it's $500, possibly $600. But Aorus Extreme is super duper high end, and it has, look at the product card there, 16 phases for the VRMs. That's 16 phases without doublers. However, it's actually 14 plus 2, you know, a mere 14 phases without doublers. But that means the Infineon controller is a 16-phase controller. So the Aorus Extreme is hitting new heights. We then across here have some Halo products. So we've got X299G is a refresh of X299, but moving across we have here, hang on, there we go. Their Aorus Extreme Waterforce version of the same. So we saw Waterforce quite recently on Z390. Look at that block. I mean, this board is mentally expensive. I think I heard a number, something like $1,100. Whatever the number is, it's just a Halo product to show this is what we can do at Gigabyte. That is, I have to say, aesthetically, that's absolutely gorgeous. As to how many they'll sell, well, you have to think very, very few. But super high-end hardware. And then we come across to the C621 Aorus Extreme motherboard. This is a board I actually thought was never going to see the light of day. It supports the 28-core Intel W3175X processor, so it's the equivalent of the Asus ROG Dominus. It's a funny thing, we're going to see Intel later on today, that processor, the 28-core, which the so-called flag chip, you had to wonder whether that was just their attempt to counter AMD, and you have to wonder if they've now almost given up the hope with it. But here we have the board, ROG Dominus. I'm sure we're going to see more of at this show. So the board exists. And just look at all the PCI Express slots running down. I mean, wowza. That's a monumental piece of hardware. Gigabyte's taking their time with this, but it's looking good. Moving down the table, here we have an add-in card. It looks something like a graphics card. It's an SSD holder, essentially. Inside, it's got 4 2TB drives, Gen 4 drives, so a total of 8 terabytes, which suggests they've actually striped the RAID array. You buy it as an assembly. It's going to cost around $2,000, but as each of the SSDs is $500, that means the card is effectively free of charge. There's talk about selling the interface card as a separate item, but whether they do or do not is almost a detail, because next to it we have the Aorus NVMe Gen 4 SSD, 2 terabytes, so it's 4 of these inside this. And look at that copper heatsink. It's actually stuck down, so I can't. We were holding one, they've glued them down, they don't trust us. We were looking at these yesterday. It's, I think, 60 grams of copper in that heatsink. It's a substantial device. Uses the Phison controller, as you can see. This is a Gen 4 SSD. The only controller at the moment that does Gen 4 is from Phison. There is this Gigabyte SSD. Corsair also has one, and I'm told Colorful, the Chinese graphics card manufacturer, is also doing SSDs with this controller in. So that's the Phison controller, just there by my finger. That is what this is all about. And the fact they've got that heatsink on it, yeah, I'm not too surprised, considering the heatsink's on the X570 chipset. And then we go around to, yeah, this Z390X Force LN2. I'm told that this is basically a toy for the overclocking brigade within Gigabyte to play with. LN2 obviously liquid nitrogen. I'm not clear what is new about it. Oh, here we go. So they've got some special, okay, I'm reading this literally as I see it. Special 2-DIMM memory layout for high-speed XMP. Right, so if we go up to the board, we can see minimal memory channels. Therefore, they're working on super fast memory. But this is all about overclocking. This is literally a toy for the in-house chaps at Gigabyte, which I must confess I kind of like. Memory. We briefly saw some Aorus RGB memory when it was like Rev 1, and it was whipped away from us because it was going to be replaced by Rev 2 or Gen 2. We understand that they've actually moved away from Samsung BDI to SK Hynix, not because they wanted to, because Samsung BDI is considered to be the standard performance chip for memory. They basically can't get supplies. Everybody wants BDI. They cannot get their hands on BDI. Moving around, anyway, it's worth having a look at those figures. And then when we move around further past this very pretty build here with Z390 Aorus Extreme Waterfall, a board I played with recently in a completely different case. I used a Lian Leo 11. That's an in-win of some sort of D-frame, I think. Moving around. And here we have a build, as the card says, with X570 Aorus Master, just showing you what's what. That cooler on there, oh, good grief. I just assume that's a Cooler Master cooler, but it's got the Aorus logo on it. Good grief, best you don't leap to assumptions, Leo. So that is a relatively tidy, relatively low-end, quite straightforward air-cooled build looking at it. That is what you can expect to see X570 being used in. Huh. And then down below the graphics card, we can see their M.2 SSD. Coming across here, we've got some monumental numbers, which are benchmark figures for the M.2 SSD, showing the benefit of PCI Express Gen 4. This figure here is the add-in card with the 4 drives in it. We found the laptops at Gigabyte. They've just finished doing the briefing that was going on, and we're now going to take a tour of the room. The laptops are scattered absolutely everywhere, but I'm right next to the OLED, and that's the one I most want to see. Look at this, the OLED, the Aero 15 OLED. So it's got all the good stuff, but starting with that OLED panel, and then we go down, Intel Core i7 or i9 H series processor, so a proper processor. Amusingly, they're claiming it's the world's only all Intel inside, which means it has a bunch of Intel hardware. However, the Ethernet and the Wi-Fi are by a killer. So it's killer 6th gen wireless and also killer Ethernet. But forget that. Look at the panel. I just adore OLED. The only concern I have over OLED panels is battery life. Does this use more battery than a regular panel or not? And the answer is possibly it does not, but they can't actually categorically and definitively tell me that. So as things stand, I'm taking it on trust that it's not going to be an Achilles heel, because a laptop has to perform in terms of battery life. But that looks absolutely stunning. The funny thing is, the OLED also has a redesigned chassis, and I'm glancing at it, and to be absolutely frank, at first look, although it's kind of silver in colour rather than black, to me it just looks like a laptop chassis. And we've got a fingerprint reader here, the keyboard is conventional, we've obviously got a whole load of RGB lighting behind the keys, that's for sure. The input outputs are on the sides in the usual way, vents around the back and the sides. You know, it is a conventional Aero laptop, except for the colour, which is silver rather than black. And once again, I'm looking at this, and that OLED panel is just blowing me away. I'm loving that. Did I mention it's a 4K OLED panel? 4K OLED. I don't know how much this is going to cost. I'm going to guess £4,500. It's going to be something quite astronomical, but that is truly gorgeous. Now here's a feature that I quite like, which is this flick cover over the webcam. However, the webcam is down the bottom. It's behind the keyboard, below the screen. Therefore, it's looking straight up your nostrils. So once again, do you want a webcam in your laptop at all? Do you like it down the bottom? No one likes it down the bottom. That's a fact. However, it's a compromise, because look at the thin bezel up the top and the sides. Thin bezel, you can't have a webcam in there apparently. But if you're going to have a webcam, the idea of a flick cover, I quite like. And moving away from that gorgeous OLED that I like a great deal to more conventional territory, we have the Aero 17. I reviewed the Aero 15, and indeed last night the Aero 15 won an EHA award, and I think we were nominating it among others. So that's probably my personal award there. So this laptop, a bigger version of the one I've already seen. So 17 inches on the diagonal, RTX 20 series graphics, 9th gen i9 or i7, and all the usual stuff we expect from Gigabyte. So just a bigger version of the laptop that I'm familiar with, and again, killer Wi-Fi, killer Ethernet. But well done Gigabyte, you won. Gigabyte has a lot of hardware to show, and they're clearly very serious about X570. What they've done with power phases is quite new. We've not seen 16 phases on anything, 16 proper phases without doublers. That is new. They are also clearly pushing the Gen 4 PCI Express. Looking forward to seeing what Gigabyte does for the next 6 months. This is really genuinely exciting. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Come back to Kit Guru during Computex. We're going to have a load of news. Hit the bell button. We'll alert you to new videos as they become available. I'm Leo Wood for Kit Guru. It's Computex 2019. This is Gigabyte Aorus.